Before we move on to anybody else, Alex, because we jumped straight into this, could you just take us through the sort of the summary, the bullet point? I think we've got a graphic here to show our viewers what I think happened.
Well, I mean, this is well, it speaks for itself. You know, obviously we started in the rain, and it's quite interesting. We saw at the very beginning, we saw Gasly going to the Inters super early, and that seemed to work quite well for him. Then Leclerc pitting for the Inters early, after the Red Bulls had started to do that, was a bit of a surprise because Leclerc had a bit of a gap from Sainz. But anyway, it didn't pay off for him. You know, Ferrari double stacked for slicks, and then Red Bull also double stacked for slicks later because once you went to intermediates, you had to go to the slicks, and that overcut the Ferrari, put him in P1. And then after that, we had that restart, didn't we? We had the red flag after the crash for Mick Schumacher, and then when it restarted, it was dry, and we saw a more typical Monaco Grand Prix in the dry. It's very hard to overtake, but of course Perez were on the mediums. You know, but both Red Bulls were on the mediums compared to the Ferraris who were on the hards. So you can see Perez had to defend really hard at the very end.
And let's talk about Ferrari then, because it was their front row lockout here in qualifying, as they were in 2017 when, of course, Kimi won the Grand Prix. I think everybody was expecting that Ferrari, with the pace they had and those two drivers, they should have won the Grand Prix. And before we get into the elephant in the room, which of course is the local driver, let's talk about Carlos, because I thought he deserved to win it, really, with that bold decision that he made from the car, Mark, to skip the intermediates and go straight onto the hard tyre from the wets.
Yeah, and I disagree with you on that, because I'm thinking, Carlos, can you please don't do what you think you should be doing. Go with what the team feels. I mean, they have the big picture. They're literally watching the competition and much closer than you are as a driver. And I think this is I was talking about this last week with some folk down in the mid part of the week down in Monaco when I arrived. And we were just talking about the way in which race strategy has evolved over the years. And of course, you take into consideration all the feedback you get from the driver. They're often described as the biggest sensor in the car, you know, the amount of feedback a driver can give you. But ultimately, the team's strategy room has the big picture of what's happening with them, their teammate, and all the competition. And when Carlos was saying, oh, you know, we should stay out, again, I was watching the timing screens and thinking, sorry, not at the rate with which the intermediates have come in. And when, you know, yes, track position is everything in Monaco, but when someone is now gaining 2-3 seconds, you know, it's Perez a second a sector in some cases, it was so much time. It was so obvious to me that he needed to go and frankly just cover that off, and to stay out ultimately really bit him. So yeah, I mean, it was brave of him to go for it, but ultimately I think it probably cost him the win. It'll be really interesting to go back through, you know, the sequence of times and the differentials. But there's no doubt there was that moment of debate and hesitation, and you can't have that. You have to make the judgment call. And on this occasion, they didn't get it quite right.
So just to be clear, do you think that Sainz should have gone onto the Inters? And if he had, he would have been further up the road than he actually was, ultimately stopping only once? Yeah,
I mean, at the time when he was having the discussion, the Inters were, for me, the way to go, just based on what I was seeing elsewhere down the timing screen. And again, I thought, okay, again, track position is all important. We know that in Monaco, and there's a tendency to say, well, let's just stay out, keep going. And obviously he felt the wet. I mean, he was still doing good lap times on the wets, but he definitely began to enter a window where the risk of staying out was clearly just building all the time. And the proof of that was, and actually it was interesting to see, you know, on the live feed, even the commentators were missing the fact that, you know, Perez was going to get the jump here. It was coming to him. And, I mean, he was just nailing in the times. And sure enough, it came his way. And I think it slightly caught everyone by surprise. You know?
Yeah. And also, I think it might be a bit of a larger problem, really. Because by the time Ferrari asked him to come in for that first intermediate stop, it was too late already. Because Perez had done 2 laps in Inters at this point. So the undercut was already done. So I also understand why he feels, okay, I've already got taken. Let's just try and gamble on the one stop and go straight to slicks. But it is part of a larger problem, because I agree with Mark that, you know, drivers need to have gone through all these strategy parts in preparation before the race. Okay, it's very tricky when it's wet like this. It's very hard to predict everything before the race starts. But it's part of a whole group of the team making the right decisions. And Ferrari have a history of not doing that well. And we haven't really talked about it yet, but operationally, we've seen Ferrari fall apart quite a bit over the last few years. You remember 2 years with Vettel, and when Vettel and Leclerc were quite serious, but halfway through the season, they started making operational mistakes and stuff. So this one, you could argue, is an operational mistake, and Ferrari have to be very, very careful that they don't spiral out of control like they did, 2018, when Vettel was really in the hunt for the championship. So this is a symptom, if you like, of an old problem, and the team needs to be sharper because Red Bull are super sharp right now.